2020 was really just the extension of all the transformation that I'd already been through. It just got accelerated and magnified in 2020, to answer your question.
It was the big cherry on top. This is the Workplace Therapist Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And the entire purpose of this show is really one singular thing, and that is to help you have better conversations at work and have healthier relationships at work. Today's show is going to be a slight pivot off of that. As we think about this year that we call 2020, there hasn't been a whole lot of positive, or at least not enough of it. And so this show is going to be all about spotlighting career transformations in 2020. And I'm really excited about this show because I think it's great for us to see these stories of hope. And so I've got really two stories for us today. The first interview is with Scott Raven, and Scott was in the traditional corporate world and he pivoted in 2020 into the franchise world. So he's going to talk about his story and some of his learnings along the way. He took a very non-traditional route, but a very purposeful and passionate route. The second story is we're going to interview Wayne Hutchinson, and Wayne was in the corporate world and found himself without a job, and then he pivoted into a different function in a different company of something he always wanted to do. So we're going to talk about Wayne's story of transformation and transition and hope. So I hope you enjoy these two interviews and these two stories, and I hope at the end you find them uplifting and hopeful. Well, Scott, really excited to have you on the show today to talk about your 2020 transformation. So before we kind of get into your journey, just so I'm got all my T's crossed and I's dotted. So your full name is Scott Raven, and you are a franchise owner of Premier Martial Arts.
That's correct. Premier Martial Arts has a little over 100 locations across the country, and I'm thrilled to be a franchise owner, predominantly in the top end of the Atlanta perimeter area. We have our first location open up in Marietta, right off the 120 loop, and our second location in Sandy Springs is under construction.
Exciting. Now, you didn't, since this is all about transformation and 2020 transformation, I think we can kind of cut to the chase that this wasn't something you've always been doing.
No, absolutely not.
So I would love to hear this story. What was your journey up to 2020? What was that thing that happened in 2020 for you that made you go, maybe I need something different? And then what led you ultimately to doing this?
Oh, it's a interesting journey that if you had asked me this even back 3 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. Because I grew up a corporate rat, right? My father was CFO of Revco drugstores, CEO of Hills department stores, which at the time they were both multi-billion-dollar companies. And I was always raised under a large corporate C-suite roof. And being the oldest, I aspired to be exactly like my father. And so I went to university. I was in the workforce for a bit. I went back, got my MBA, started to do the Atlanta rotation through Home Depot and Georgia Pacific and Cox with their Manheim division. And I was just continuing
I love that, the Atlanta rotation.
That's right.
You really did. You just missed Delta and Coke. I mean,
it really was, right? And I was going quite happily just up the ladder, right, at my own pace, right? And, I was making a very nice life for myself and my family, right? But, right around 2017, things started to change because at that point, Cox Automotive, which is the parent company of Manheim, had to do some soul searching as they were integrating their dealer track acquisition, right? And on the flip side, myself being a father of young kids, they were 7 and 3 at the time, right? I had more of a desire to be with them than to sacrifice those hours in the workplace, right? And so when ultimately there was a reduction in force where I was impacted, right? My first thought at this point was fantastic. This was the break I needed. This is a good point for me to have that pause, to get reset, to figure out, how do I balance being a terrific professional, but also a wonderful husband and father at the same time, because I was working 70, 75-hour weeks easily, right?
Yeah.
So, That's about 3 years ago, right? And I thought that I had enough knowledge and enough skill in order to navigate that next phase of my life. Long story short, I didn't. And because I didn't, it caused a number of different conditions with me that ultimately led me to go to the hospital at the very end of 2017 with a hypertension attack, right? And in the coming months, what I learned about myself was that I was so geared up in terms of gotta be successful, gotta be successful, gotta be successful, right?
Yeah.
That I was causing myself physical and mental anguish. And that was not the path that was going to lead me to where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
So I got a wonderful team around me. You've had Amy Baylog on your show before, right? She's
Yeah.
a part of the team that's helped me, right?
She's
And
great.
absolutely, absolutely. And I started to really take that journey, that introspective journey in terms of who did I want to be? Did I want to be exactly like my father, or did I want to be my own man?
Yeah.
And because of that, right, I started to learn things and put myself in environments that were very productive for me. So I didn't go immediately into franchising to Premier Martial Arts. I actually went to SunTrust and took a position there. But it was a great combination in terms of being able to have an environment where I could prove I could be successful in my own way, at the same time integrating all of these lessons that I was learning. So when SunTrust and BB&T announced their merger to become Truist, and new guy into the pool, right? I could see the writing on the wall a while away, right? I was in a fantastic position to consider alternate paths. And it just so happened that you had the coalescence of myself about to get eliminated at Truist, my son being in a karate dojo himself, right, learning and seeing him grow, and me being approached by Premier Martial Arts, who was looking to expand in the Atlanta area, specifically looking for people who had business leadership skills. As I got to learn more about their journey, as I got to work with the team up in Knoxville and really feel that sense of family, there was a passion that hadn't been there in quite some time. So when you talk about the transformation that I went through in 2020, 2020 was really just the extension of all the transformation that I'd already been through. It just got accelerated and magnified in 2020, to answer your question.
It was the big cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about 2020. What point did you say, okay, this is the path? I want to go ahead and go down this path of franchising with Premier Martial Arts. I'm going to do this. Was that before the pandemic, after the pandemic? When?
So, it was before the pandemic, right? So I made my decision to join the franchisor in October of 2019, right? And I was going merrily along in terms of scouting sites and taking a look at different locations across the territories that I have rights to, right? And I was actually right at the point where I had signed my letter of intent on my first location and going through the lease negotiation process. And I believe it was March 13th, the last day.
Oh, I know that day really well.
Call it non-COVID life, because I was volunteering as a assistant coach for my son's baseball team, right?
Yeah.
And even then, right, we were out in the field and nobody was high-fiving. We were all doing glove taps and all this other good stuff, right? Because we knew the state of the world. And all of us coaches looked at each other and it's like, well, if this is the last time that we get together, it's been a pleasure. And sure enough, the very next day, right, schools got closed, baseball season on hold, this, that, or the other, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to have a serious thought in terms of, okay, I'm on this journey. I've already made the commitment. My chips are in the pot, right? I can't do anything to control COVID, right? Yeah. What I can do is I can control how I interact in this COVID world, right? And the biggest thing that I did was I said, I made a commitment to bring these locations to life because not only did I want to have an environment and have a means of financial wealth for my family, right? But I truly believe the purpose of Premier Martial Arts, which was I wanted to empower lives through martial arts. I can't do that if I don't have a site. I can't do that if I don't continue to do the work in order to bring these locations to life. So I just said, you know what, COVID, I respect you. I'm going to keep myself safe. I'm going to keep my family safe. They got to keep going. I got to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
You can't pause me from what I had already committed to. And that's really the attitude that I brought to this. And, for your viewers, right, wherever they are, that is what I would encourage them is, if it's circumstantial, right? COVID, while significant, is circumstantial, right? What are you doing to make sure you are not letting circumstances you can't control impact you, right? How are you taking this and saying, I'm going to control what I can control, and I'm going to put myself in a better position than yesterday?
That is a mic drop moment right there, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Excellent. Beautiful. All right. So as you sit here today, as we're kind of landing the plane of 2020, whatever fashion it's going to land, I'm not quite sure yet.
I think the month of March is now blended into 8 months at this point. So something like that. Mm-hmm.
So what have you learned? Is there anything else that you've learned along this journey as you've been, getting these kind of your franchises kind of up and running, and anything else that's kind of really stood out for you?
The biggest thing that I've learned, particularly in this 2020 year, is that there is a wide spectrum of people, and that you may not entirely 100% align with every person that you meet, but you should respect everybody who is on the spectrum. I'll give you an example, right? As I think about my location in East Marietta, right? I've got a wide spectrum of people in terms of those people who will come to my school and will say, I would rather not wear a mask because it interferes with my ability to perform the moves, right? Which we say it's highly encouraged, but it is not required, right?
Yep.
And that's fine. I have a lot of my people in Marietta who come masks on. Yes, sometimes they got to take a break in terms of, saying, I just got to catch my breath, whatnot, right? But they still want that environment, and they still appreciate all the safety things in terms of spacing out our mat, cleaning, et cetera, right? That we're doing to say, look, we can't control COVID, but we're going to make this a safe environment for you because we don't want you holed up in the house. We want you to feel that this is a safe place for you to come and grow not only as martial arts but as a professional, right?
Yeah.
And then I've got a swath of people who have passed by and have said, you know what, I love what you guys have done. I love how we have been a part of your family, but we just got to take a pause as recently the COVID numbers are increasing, right? And I'm like, that's fine. I respect your opinion. And once everything is back to a state that you feel you can come back, the doors are open, right? And really, one of the things that our leadership up in Knoxville talks about is we're trying to make our environments as inclusive as possible, right?
Yeah.
We try to make it so that everybody feels welcome and that we can give that environment to others. So what's one of the biggest things that I've learned in 2020, to your question, right? The more that you can make yourself inclusive to others, the better you will have an opportunity to grow from them and to succeed. Please do not be closed-minded, right?
Yeah.
That would be my advice to others in terms of, if you find yourself saying no, stop and think, why is it that you're saying no? Is the reason you're saying no a justifiable one? And if not, give it a pause and say, well, what if I said yes to this? What could happen?
Oh, I love that. What if I said yes? What could happen? I love that. So for those folks who are listening to this or watching this and they're thinking to themselves, I've always wanted to leave the corporate world and go into franchising or do something else, what advice would you have for them that would either say, yeah, this is the right thing for you, or yeah, maybe this isn't the right thing for you? What are some of those, key things you've learned about yourself that you would want to see in others to go down this path?
Okay. So, a couple things. First, have your financial house in order, right? If you are going to go into the franchising world, bear in mind, just like any other small business, do not expect to pay yourself for quite some time, right? And so if you're looking at it from a standpoint of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get rich quick, no, it's not going to happen, right? So have your financial house in order, right? Second, take a look at it not so much in terms of what you are directly interested in, but in terms of opportunities that may seem exciting to you. To give you an example, right? I was not affiliated with martial arts at all. I was never a martial artist growing up. My touch point to martial arts was my son going through, and that was just a couple of months before I found Premier, right? If you had said, hey, you're going into franchising, what type of franchise do you want, right? I would have immediately thought, all right, well, let's do food, or let's do, hair cutting or something like that, right? But the trick to being in a franchise model is you have to have a natural passion for what that franchisor is trying to accomplish. If you don't have the passion for it, much like anything in life, you're going to lose interest. And when you lose interest, that's when your business is going to go sideways, right? So have a passion for what that franchisor is bringing to the table and how it is going to impact you. The third and foremost thing that I would say in terms of franchising versus, being in a corporate environment, right? I certainly subscribe to the fact that I do not like, nor was I ever good at corporate politics. And I think a lot of people, as they continue to move up the chain, and that becomes more and more a part of their success model, right?
Yeah.
Have differing views on that, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
When you enter any small business, franchise is no different, right? One of the benefits is that level of politics significantly reduces, right? But you also have to drop that off in terms of the way that you lead and manage your people, right? You have to say, you know what? I am not in that environment anymore. I am not in the environment where I'm trying to think 5 moves down the chessboard in terms of, if I say this, how is that going to impact others, right? I want to relate to people as if there's full transparency, full honesty, full cooperation. If I need to say something tough, right? Say it tough but fair, because these people who you bring in, they become part of your extended family. And for those people who are in those corporate environments that are like, no, I got a job, I got a salary, that's great, but I feel no emotion to this, right? If what you're truly seeking is an emotional attachment to what you do, this is a great opportunity to go do it.
Yeah, and I love that. But it's also, you've got to be equipped to have different kinds of relationships, and in some ways a little more honest, maybe a little more intimate, for lack of a better term, because that's also going to be the kind of relationships you want to have with your customers and with your communities that you're serving.
That's right. I mean, I'm not only the owner, I have a great team behind me, but I'm also a member. I mean, last night I was up at my Marietta location. It was graduation day, and all of our students, myself included, got their first bell advancement from white to yellow.
Nice.
And I am, and I'm, having my head instructor put the yellow belt on me, and all of the other adults that are in the class session that I go to clap for me, just like I'm clapping for them. They know I'm the owner, but they also see me as one of the gang, right? Yeah. That's fantastic. It's a fantastic environment to be in.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Scott, this was really, we talked right before the show about, really needing hope in 2020. And I love your story of one of kind of hope for us and, pushing through and creating something that didn't exist during this year, which is really exciting, and it's serving people in a different way and serving communities. So thank you for what you've done in 2020 and what you're continuing to do. So if people want to learn more about you, more about your locations, where can they go?
So learning more about me, I've got a LinkedIn profile, right? Feel free to, give me a connect, right? You can learn more about my story and some of my other endeavors, right? As it relates to Premier Martial Arts, for my locations that are up running or up and coming, my East Marietta location, pmaeastmarietta.com, and my forthcoming Sandy Springs, which should open at the very beginning of next year, pmasandysprings.com. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, this is great. Well, Scott, again, incredible. Really good luck. Wish you tremendous success in the remainder of 2020 and into 2021. And I look forward to kind of hearing how things play out for you. So thanks for coming on the
Brandon,
show.
for having me on.
Yeah. Well, Wayne, I'm really excited to talk to you about your kind of 2020 journey and 2020 transformation. So maybe a good starting place. Well, naturally, you and I have spent some time working with each other. So your full name, Wayne Hutchinson. What's your role today?
Right now, I'm the Senior Compliance and Risk Controls Analyst for Avanos Medical.
Okay, so that's what you do today.
For the IT side.
For the IT side. So when you and I were talking before I had you on the show today, you shared that 2020 has been kind of a big transformational year for you and
Right.
kind of a journey for you. So if it's okay, why don't we go all the way back to January 1st, 2020, before this year really started to turn into the year it was. Where would we have found you? Where were you in the beginning of this year?
At the beginning of 2020, I was currently full-time employed with Comcast, the Central Division here in Atlanta, Georgia. And my role there was kind of a mixed bag, but primarily I was responsible for all IT architecture teams. I had an IT architectural team that worked for me across the division. And I had just recently moved out of the role of IT security and compliance manager. And I had a team, that worked with me both nationally and throughout the division. And it was more or less where I kind of had my foot in each role because the company had a need. We had some transitioning happening, and they basically needed a leader for those two teams more than they needed a subject matter expert. But I ended up being the candidate they chose for both of those and managed both teams, and then hired a new manager for the team I left and, transitioned them into a new game plan with the new manager. So was responsible for the transition of two teams at once, to a new leader and basically exiting as a leader from another team. So it's a big challenge for me.
So big challenge. So then that's how 2020 kind of started.
That's correct.
Now walk us through this party that's been 2020. What was the part of it that started to turn for you? And tell us a little about that.
The turning point, I can actually put a date to it, would be February 12th, 2020, when my architectural team that I had built, put together, and kind of managed and fostered into something viable, was let go from the company because they just weren't a part of the new direction we were going in, and the team I had left.
So the whole team, all six of us. Yeah. Okay.
And the IT security team that I had left and hired a manager for was, still there, and it is still there because it was more, they believed they could take on the role. So the thing about that is that it can be devastating, and it was devastating a little bit. But I'm a very practically minded person. I was a highly focused technology person, a lot of more of a tactical than a strategic role. And I realized I'd been in my career for about 27 years. I'd been very tactical in everything I do, not very strategic. And so really for me, the eye-opening experience was maybe this was a kick in the butt to the right direction and to where your mind actually works, the way that you think. You're a big picture guy. You see all these things at 10,000 feet and can stand at 0 feet and be effective as well. But maybe 10,000 feet is where you need to live from now on. So that's my transformation, is more from a tactical to a strategic person. So I started looking in that workspace when I started looking for a new job.
So I want to go back. I don't mean to bring up too many painful memories, but it's February 12th. This thing has happened.
Yes.
For most of the folks I work with, most of us, and even for me personally, when you have something devastating or traumatic that happens to you,
right,
it takes some time to have some of those light bulbs go off. It's not just like, oh, well, now all of a sudden I'm going to, do things differently. Tell us a little about that. How long did it take you, and what was, and did you do anything special that that had that all of a sudden that realization happen where you said, I kind of like the 10,000 foot stuff. Maybe I should do that.
The thing of it took a few weeks actually of after you interviewing. I mean, I took a breath, caught my breath, took some time off, took about a week off. But I will tell you that that's not an epiphany that I went looking for. It kind of happened to me. It's actually the result of other people I started coming into contact with, interviewing with, talking to, recruiters. I went out and did a couple of networking events here in the Atlanta area, job fairs, career fairs, stuff like that. And in talking to people, I realized when I would get feedback from them, the things that they would point out that really stood out to them were not skills or characteristics that I had really spent a lot of time focusing on and working on. And they, through those conversations, I started to realize maybe I should listen to what other people think of me as a person, look at those skills and maybe start capitalizing on them and change my job search and my career path a little bit. And that's exactly what I did. I went home that night. I went to a job fair here in Alpharetta, Georgia, and I went home that night with a completely different outlook on what I was trying to do and what I wanted. And I changed my entire job search strategy. And believe it or not, I started getting hits on those things because I was moving outside my comfort zone, working on those traits that I didn't think were as important. But apparently people were looking for those things.
So I think it's a really good takeaway for us and everyone listening. You didn't just sit in your house and kind of, contemplate your navel. You were out there meeting people, talking to folks, and then really listening to what they played back to you.
Yep. Yeah, it was very it was very tribal in nature. I listened to what other people had to say instead of being my own tribe. I forced myself to go do something. I'm not a job fair person. I'm not a networking person. I don't like to go out and do those types of things. I went to those events because I wanted to kind of get my feelers out there for what was going on. And for the most part, I can't say that every interaction was valuable, but there were a couple that stood out, and that's what happened. Is that one of those things like and I could lay out a list of traits that I kind of focused on, but it really goes back to the bigger thing of tactical versus strategic, and I became very strategically minded when I started going home and doing job searches and talking to people and having conversations and even interviews after that.
Okay, so now our arc of our story is starting to move upwards, right? Things are starting to get a little more hopeful. So tell us about that search process. What were some strategies you approached and took on as you were looking for roles, and then what ultimately got you in the seat that you've been sitting in now?
So not just looking for a company, but looking for what value you could bring to the company. So I changed the questions that I ask during interviews. During interviews before that, my question style was more or less, like what's your plan for this type of technology implementation? Talking to me about project development, software development life cycles, things like that. I kind of veered my questioning away from that and more into what's your biggest problem right now, and what do you think I could do to help you based on what you saw on my resume and the conversation we're having now. And honestly, you're kind of inviting nuance into the conversation that you don't normally get in an interview. And I think that's, for me, was a good shift in my questioning of the interviewer. And it got me a couple of follow-up calls, I'm pretty sure, because I was able to actually relate, to some of the issues and gaps you're having from previous experience.
That's beautiful. So you really kind of put on your consulting hat a little bit, and you started asking questions like, Tell us about your organizational pain points. What's the stuff you're trying to accomplish, or what's blocking you from doing that? And then how might me or someone in my role fix that or alleviate that or smooth things over? Nice.
Right.
And modeling that more strategic approach, not tactical in nature, versus much more high level.
Exactly.
So you started approaching things that way. And then tell us about kind of the happy moment when you landed this role.
The happy moment when I landed this role occurred in April. So had a nice little 2-month, job search time there. But really, and it was more late March, early April. I did a couple interviews with the company and an in-person interview. All of those went swimmingly well. And I will say they were actually a little tough. I was actually, a little bit challenged. But I don't think my frustration came through in trying to really sell myself and sell the value. But what I was able to do was continue that conversation that we had over the phone about, where do you see me, working in your organization? I'm not just here to fill a position. You've got some immediate things you're probably just not sleeping well at night over, and what can I do to help, with those and plan. And I think the willingness to kind of, jump right in and roll your sleeves up and be valuable on day one was a huge selling point. And it was genuine too. It's not something that you want to do and not be genuine about. You want to be genuinely do that, and then you'll have to follow up on it when you get there. So I think when I got the job from Avanos, I did a lot of research on the company before I even applied. I was one of the things that I did in my shift from tactical to strategic was to really do research on a company before I went after them and applied for them. And they had some really good corporate citizenship that really sat well with me. It's manufacturing, it's the medical device industry, so really kind of an emerging industry with a lot of tech, but a balance of business. So hit a lot of the check boxes I had, and I was very pleased to be able to just interview with them in the first place.
Yeah, really exciting. And so now as you look at the job you have today versus the job you were in, say, January 1st, 2020, in what ways are they similar? In what ways are they different?
In a similar sense, they're both very heavy on thought leadership and knowledge workmanship. So you really got to know your craft, and you really got to be a good voice for your craft. You can't just be noise. You have to actually have some signal. Your signal to noise ratio has got to be where it's supposed to be at. They both required you to be very level-headed and practical in your approach to things. I have a very pragmatic nature about how I approach and do things. I like to capitalize off of the experiences and standards of others and kind of build on that. And those things were similar. What was different was, again, I was more in the technology implementation side, which did require me to be very strategic, but I had a lot of tactical responsibilities like, incident response and working through overnights and a lot of that kind of work. And that's the difference between the position I'm in now is even though I was doing those things in another role in sort of the same capacity, now I'm more on the coaching side of the whole thing where I'm not actually doing a lot of the hands-on work. I'm guiding and coaching through it and then making sure it's done properly and then looking for process improvement opportunities, all the while taking as much responsibility for it as the person that's still on the execution side as well. And I think that's what really makes this position different is that I'm able to take all those years of experience and really kind of relate to people that are down in the trenches on the front line of our business and not be in their way, but also be a valuable part of what they're trying to do. And that's the real shift for me is that I've had to step back and let someone else do a lot of things that I would have done myself in the past. And I'm not actually a direct leader of a lot of people like I used to be. I've got a very small team that I am a part of, and I don't spend my day worrying about if people are working the hours they're supposed to or anything, a lot of people leadership stuff. It's thought leadership. And that's a huge transformation for me and it makes me a little uncomfortable from time to time, but I think I'm faring pretty well.
So here's my kind of final question for you today, Wayne. So as the folks who are listening to this right now, for anyone maybe who's in job transition or feeling stuck or just feeling like there is no path forward, what advice might you have for them today?
The first thing I would do is I will be honest with you and tell you, here's where these statements come from. I got very discouraged. I wasn't flipping through the yellow pages, seeing what the number to the local, truck driving school was or anything and thinking I'm going to make that large of a change in my life. But I got very discouraged about, am I hireable? I'm older in the industry. I've been working in the IT industry since the early 90s. A lot of the things I know are stale, so a lot of them are current, and trying to land in a position that just perfectly rounds out and takes advantage of everything I know and do is impossible. And I may have to find a little piece of what I know and work in that area. So I really thought that my career, or at least my skills, would take a hit because I would be working, in more of a hyper-focused capacity where I'm more of a big picture person. So my advice is really just to, understand that your comfort zone is flexible. It's extremely flexible. And not only is it flexible, it's, if this is a word, it's shiftable. It's movable. You can actually move to an entirely different comfort zone and redefine what is comfortable and uncomfortable to you. The other thing too, is that having the support of my family behind me. They were really instrumental in me finding a job. I would actually work with my wife, who's a psychologist, on preparing for interviews and working, and who doesn't work in the IT industry, by the way. She's on the medical industry. So, it's good to have somebody that's more an objective point of view to rehearse your questions. What do you think you're going to say? Don't try to do it all on your own. And then the last thing I would say is, it's kind of a cliche, but never ever give up. Never give up on yourself. Look at the certificates you have on your wall. Look at your resume. Look at your achievements. That stuff is real. It's actual. It's stuff you've actually done. You are a person. You are a doer, and you're not just a casual observer to your career. You're actually your career. So you can do this. And the last thing is, over the course of 2 months, I got so many rejections. It's discouraging. Rejections are painful. They're discouraging. And I won't say that they're not personal, because they are personal. You keep them personally. But I will tell you that it's one of those diamond in the rough kind of things. You can't see rejections as anything but part of the process. And honestly, that's a coaching opportunity for yourself, to self-edit a little bit and maybe go through and say, here's what I would have done differently, or maybe it wasn't your fault at all. The problem is that you can't Monday morning quarterback your own self all the time. At some point, you've got to turn the corner and move forward. And that was something I struggled with, and I started doing around early March.
Yeah. So be able and willing to shift your comfort zone. Really get support of your family and others to kind of help you through the process. Don't ever give up, and then really take those rejections or those experiences that don't play out the way you want them to, and treat them as kind of learning opportunities. Like what can I learn from that, so I can go faster, smarter, better, and then holding on to those other pieces to help you through that, like family and not ever giving up.
And the other thing about the self editing is those are micro changes, not macro changes. Don't completely change who you are between 2 interviews with a company.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Wayne, thank you. I'm so glad not only have I gotten to know you in 2020, but just for you to share your story, because I think if there's anything that we all need right now is a little more light and hope, and you're providing us that. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing how 2021 goes for you.
Thank you. I can't wait to tell you the story.
So I hope you enjoyed those 2 very inspiring and hopeful stories of transformation in 2020. Scott's story is not only hopeful and inspiring, but it gives us a different point of view. And Wayne's story is equally inspiring, but allows us to think how we might actually change into a different role, different company, and find a path forward and not feel that sense of stuckness and frustration. If you have a story of transformation, please send it our way. I'd love to hear it, and love an opportunity to not only learn about your stories, but potentially even have you as a future guest. Because I think, if anything, we need more hope and more stories like this to show us paths forward. So as we close out our show today, hopefully you've got a chance to rate and review our show. If you haven't, please do. That's how people find our show. If you'd like more resources, of course, you can go to theworkplacetherapist.com for blog posts, past podcasts, and other resources. And if you haven't bought a copy of my newest book, The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time, you really should. I wrote it for you. And it would make a great Christmas gift. You could give it to all your family and friends. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.